There are new bombshell claims today from royal insiders who say King Charles's cancer is incurable and he will likely die with the disease.
Prince Harry will be returning to the UK for events around the one-year countdown to the Birmingham Invictus Games next month. But I can now exclusively reveal that Meghan and their two kids, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, are coming back too.
King Charles is running out of time, not in a dramatic, sudden way, but in the quiet, cruel way that serious illness works, slowly, privately, one careful day at a time. And somewhere in California, two young children are growing up, not really knowing who their grandfather is. A 7-year-old boy who barely remembers England, a 5-year-old girl who has never really known it. Their grandfather is a king. Their uncle will one day be a king. They are part of one of the most famous families in the world, and yet, for 4 years, they have been kept from all of it. Today we are telling the story of how that is finally about to change, and why it nearly did not happen at all. There is a photograph most people have never seen. It was taken in the summer of 2022 at Windsor Castle, during Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. In it, a little boy named Archie, 3 years old, gap-toothed smile, completely unaware of the cameras, is sitting on his great-grandmother's lap. The Queen is laughing, really laughing, the kind of laugh that reaches her eyes. It would be one of the last times she ever saw him. Queen Elizabeth died 2 months later, and Archie, along with his little sister Lilibet, has not set foot on British soil since. That was 4 years ago. 4 years of birthdays. 4 years of school runs and scraped knees and first lost teeth, and all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that a grandfather, an uncle, cousins, an entire family has simply missed. And at the center of all of it is a question that has hung over the House of Windsor like a gray English sky. Will Harry ever bring his children home? For a long time, the answer seemed to be no. Definitively, painfully, publicly, no. But something has shifted. Quietly, carefully, something has changed. And the story of how it happened is more complicated, more human, and more emotionally raw than most people realize. So today, we are telling it from the beginning, the full story, the hope, the heartbreak, the legal battles, and the fragile possibility of something that looks, just slightly, like a reconciliation. Because to understand where Harry and his family are now, you have to go back to where it all started to fall apart. The year is 2020. Prince Harry and Meghan have just made the most dramatic exit from royal life in living memory. They stepped back from senior duties in January, announced they would split their time between the UK and North America, and by the spring, they were gone. First to Canada, then California. The official line was that they wanted financial independence and a more private life. And on the surface, that was true. But underneath it was something far messier. A family fracture that had been building for years, tensions between Harry and the palace institution, reports of Meghan feeling isolated and unsupported. A relationship between the two brothers, William and Harry, that had been quietly deteriorating long before anyone outside the family realized. And then came the decisions that made repair feel almost impossible. The Oprah interview in March 2021, watched by over 17 million people in the UK alone. In it, Harry and Meghan made a series of allegations about the royal family, including claims about conversations regarding the skin color of their unborn child, and Meghan's account of feeling so isolated that she had thoughts of taking her own life. The palace responded with a single, carefully worded statement. The family, it said, were saddened to hear how difficult the last few years had been, and that recollections may vary. 3 words. Recollections may vary. It was a response that said everything and nothing at the same time. Then came the Netflix documentary. Then came Spare, Harry's memoir, published in January 2023. A book so candid, so personal, and at times so brutal in its portrayals of William, Charles, and Camilla that it felt to many observers like a door being slammed, loudly, publicly, for all the world to hear. William, by multiple accounts, was devastated. The two men who had clung to each other as boys at their mother's funeral, who had walked behind her coffin together, side by side, while the whole world watched, who had stood as each other's best man. They were no longer speaking. But here is where the story starts to turn. And it turns, as so many things in life do, not because of grand gestures or dramatic announcements, but because of something quieter, something unavoidable. A father became ill. In February 2024, Buckingham Palace announced that King Charles III had been diagnosed with cancer. The type was not disclosed. The treatment had already begun. And something in Harry shifted. Within weeks, he was on a plane to London. He visited his father at Clarence House. The meeting lasted roughly 45 minutes. It was, by all accounts, brief but significant. A son showing up for a sick parent, setting aside the anger and the hurt and the years of bitterness for something more fundamental. Just family. Harry returned to California. But the door, which had felt firmly shut, was now, just slightly, ajar. Later that year, in September 2025, Harry was in London again. Another meeting with Charles. This time described by those close to the situation as warmer, more personal. A father and son, both of them older, both of them carrying their own private weight, finding their way back to something real. It was the first time they had seen each other in 19 months. 19 months. When you say it out loud, it sounds almost incomprehensible. A father and son. A king and his youngest child. 19 months of silence between visits, in a world where they could have been on a video call in seconds. But that is what the estrangement had cost them. That is what the fallout from Spare, and the documentaries, and the public accusations had built between them. Not a wall exactly, but something close to it. And yet, there they were, sitting across from each other, talking. Now we come to the part of this story that has generated more headlines, more legal argument, and more genuine heartbreak than almost anything else. The security question. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties in February 2020, their automatic, round-the-clock, taxpayer-funded armed police protection was removed. Harry has always maintained, consistently, publicly, repeatedly, that this removal is the single biggest obstacle to bringing his family back to the UK. And when you look at it from his perspective, it is not a trivial concern. He is the son of a woman who was, by many accounts, hounded to her death. He is a man who has received very credible and very serious death threats. He spent 10 years in the British military, including 2 tours in Afghanistan, a fact that significantly elevates his security risk profile. He has not been making this argument quietly. He has been making it in courts, in interviews, in written statements to the High Court, in letters to government ministers. In 2023, Harry published a witness statement that said plainly, "The UK is my home. I love my country, but I cannot bring my wife and children here without knowing they are safe." In May 2025, he lost a Court of Appeal case against the UK government over the issue. It was a devastating legal defeat. And Harry, speaking to the BBC shortly afterwards, said something that stopped many people in their tracks. He said, "I cannot see a world in which I would be bringing my wife and children back to the UK at this point. They are going to miss everything. I love my country. I always have done. I think it is really quite sad that I will not be able to show my children my homeland." That interview was painful to listen to. Not because of the politics of it, not because of the ongoing royal family drama, but because underneath all of that, it was just a father talking about his children, about not being able to take his son to see the town where he grew up, about his daughter, born in California, barely knowing her grandfather, growing up with Britain as an abstraction rather than a place she belongs to. And then, something changed again. By late 2025 and into 2026, the security situation had begun to shift in ways that nobody quite expected. A full-scale review of Harry's protection arrangements was launched by the official government body that assesses security for royals and VIPs. Evidence was collected from Harry's team, from the police, from government officials. And then, quietly, without fanfare, reports began emerging that the review was leaning in Harry's favor, that there were, in the words of those close to the situation, positive noises coming from the government. King Charles, according to reports, intervened personally, offering his own resources to help facilitate the security requirements needed for Harry's visit. The Home Office is understood to have approved round-the-clock armed police protection, funded by taxpayers, for the duration of their stay. Let that sink in for a moment. The king, a man who has been at the center of this family rupture, whose relationship with his son has been fractured and rebuilt and fractured again, quietly stepped in to help make it possible for Harry to come home safely. That is not the action of a man who has given up on his son. That is the action of a father. And so the landscape that had felt impossible, the landscape Harry described as a world he could not see, started to look different. Harry is expected to travel to Birmingham in July 2026 for the one-year-to-go celebration for the 2027 Invictus Games, the veterans' sporting competition that has become the defining project of his public life. Something he created, something born directly from his own military experience, something that speaks to the very best version of who he is. And this time, for the first time in 4 years, reports suggest he will not be coming alone. Meghan is expected to join him, and their children, Archie, now 7 years old, and Lilibet, now 5, are being spoken about as likely to make the trip as well. 4 years. Think about that for a moment, in real human terms. Archie was 3 the last time he was in the UK. He will have almost no memory of it. Of the streets, the weather, the particular quality of English light on a summer afternoon. Of his grandfather's voice in person rather than over a screen. And Lilibet, who was born in California and has visited the UK only once in her life, for her first birthday at Frogmore Cottage in 2022, barely knows the country at all. She is 5 years old, and Britain to her is almost entirely a story her parents tell. King Charles has not seen his grandchildren since 2022, and with his health being what it is, managed, monitored, subject to the kind of careful daily balancing act that serious illness demands, every visit that does not happen is a visit that may never happen. Time, as the royal family knows better than most, does not pause. If this visit goes ahead as currently hoped, sources say a meeting between the children and King Charles is very likely. A grandfather meeting his grandchildren properly after 4 years. That is the thing at the heart of all of this. Not the legal battles, not the newspaper headlines, not even the question of whether Harry and William will ever fully repair their relationship. It is a grandfather and 2 small children, and the time that has passed between them that can never be given back. Now, because this is a story that contains real human warmth alongside real human messiness, we have to talk about the complications, because they are real. Meghan's return to the UK will not be simple. Her poll ratings in Britain have been, to put it plainly, poor. She has not been seen in the UK since Queen Elizabeth's funeral in September 2022. The press, which has never been warm toward her, will be watching every moment of this visit with the kind of scrutiny that would be exhausting for almost anyone. One royal commentator suggested that Meghan would, in part, be protected by bringing Archie and Lilibet, that the presence of 2 young children would soften the coverage, redirect the attention, and make it much harder for the narrative to turn hostile. That is a cynical read, but it is not entirely wrong. But here is what that framing misses, and it misses something important. Meghan is also a mother who has watched her children grow up largely cut off from half of their heritage. From the country their father calls home, from the grandfather who is sick, and who, whatever the relationship between the adults has been, loves them. Whatever else you think about the decisions Harry and Meghan have made, whatever side of this complicated family story you land on, the children did not make any of those decisions. They were not part of those choices, and they deserve to know where their father comes from. There is one more thread running through all of this that deserves its own moment. Harry and William, the two brothers who grew up in the most watched family on earth, who shared a bedroom as young boys, who held each other up after their mother died, who were, for a long time, the most beloved figures in the royal family precisely because of what they represented together. That relationship is still broken. It has not healed. There has been no dramatic reconciliation, no moment where they sat across from each other and said everything that needed to be said. William, by all accounts, remains deeply hurt, not just by the public criticism, though that was severe, but by the sense that private family moments were exposed, that things shared in confidence appeared in print, that the brother he trusted chose the world over the family. Harry, for his part, has maintained that he had no choice, that he was trying to tell his truth, that the institution they both served had failed to protect Meghan in the way it should have. Both of them believe they are right, and both of them, in some complicated way, probably are. But here is what has shifted. Harry is no longer making the same sharpness of public attack that defined the period around Spare and the Netflix documentary. The hostilities have de-escalated, slowly, imperfectly, but noticeably. And William, who once refused to engage at all, has been conspicuously quiet in a way that feels less like anger and more like waiting. Waiting for what, exactly? Nobody knows for certain. But if Archie and Lilibet walk through a door and see their grandfather, and if that visit goes well, and if the family can sit together in the same room without it ending in catastrophe, then maybe, just maybe, there is a conversation waiting on the other side of all of this. Not forgiveness, necessarily. Not everything resolved. Not the old relationship magically restored. But something between total estrangement and genuine warmth. And sometimes, in complicated families, something is everything. What this story is really about, underneath all the headlines and the legal battles and the palace intrigue, is something very ordinary. A family that fell apart. Not because they are royals, not because of constitutional crises or security protocols or Netflix deals, but because families fall apart. Because communication breaks down, because hurt accumulates faster than it can be processed, because people say things in anger and in pain that cannot be unsaid, and because pride, on all sides, makes the road back feel longer than it actually is. The British royal family does all of this in front of the entire world. Every stumble is photographed. Every silence is interpreted. Every visit is timed and analyzed and given a significance that would crush a normal family gathering. And yet, underneath all of that, there is a king who is ill and who wants to see his grandchildren before time runs out. There is a father who loves his country and wants his children to know where they come from. There is a 7-year-old boy who barely remembers England and a 5-year-old girl who has never really known it. And there is the possibility, fragile, uncertain, not guaranteed, that this summer they come home. Not to everything being fixed, not to reunions and reconciliations and a perfect ending. Just home. To a country. To a grandfather. To a part of themselves they have never quite had the chance to find. After 4 years of silence and legal battles and public statements and private grief, that possibility alone feels like something worth holding on to. Because in the end, this is not really a story about royalty. It is a story about a family, about the damage that distance does, about how long it takes to find your way back to the people who matter, and about 2 small children, a 7-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl, who had nothing to do with any of the arguments and everything to do with why, eventually, the door has to open again. The long road home. It has been 4 years in the making, and it might, just might, finally be coming to an end.